down, head up in some red clouds. That's what you believe about me. I don't mean to be let down, but you best believe the fire's on its way now. Play dead, that's what you've been hoping. Told them I won't show, and they don't need to worry about me. But the quiet always comes first, then the devil brings the lightning and the thunder. Take a shot, come see what you made of. 'Cause fired up 'cause you know, 'cause I can't, won't stop, won't let go. No surrender, even on my knees, 'cause there's nowhere better for me. And I'm fired up 'cause you know, and I can't, won't stop, won't let go. No surrender, even on my knees, 'cause there's nowhere better for me. Shut down, turning all the lights up, calling me a writer. Thought you got the best of me, thought you had me nailed down, but you'll never get the keys or the crown. 'Cause there's something that you don't know about, something you ain't heard about, never really got about me. I'ma fight until the bell sounds, and you don't wanna get me in the ring now. So take a shot, come see what you made of. 'Cause I'm fired up 'cause you know, 'cause I can't, won't stop, won't let go. No surrender, even on my knees, 'cause there's nowhere better for me. And I'm fired up 'cause you know, and I can't, won't stop, won't let go. No surrender, even on my knees, 'cause there's nowhere better for me. Nowhere, 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 'cause there's nowhere better for me. Nowhere, 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 nowhere. Fired up 'cause you know, 'cause I can't, won't stop, won't let go. No surrender, even on my knees, 'cause there's nowhere better for me. And I'm fired up 'cause you know, and I can't, won't stop, won't let go. No surrender, even on my knees, 'cause there's nowhere better for me. 'Cause there's nowhere better for me. 'Cause there's nowhere better for me. I'm no immortal, but my fire will never die. They take me for a fool, I'm taken for a ride. The more my feet are battered, the more I'm taken down. The more they think I'm innocent, I'm fighting from the ground. 'Cause I can take this pain, it's changing me. I will rise up to the moment, and I won't stay the same. There's my decree. Burning like a flame, I'm coming to train. I'm coming your way, your way. Thunder with the rain, I'm flooding the game. Start running away, away. Battle through the pain, transforming the game. I'm storming your way, your way. And it, I'm fighting from the ground. 'Cause I can take this pain, it's changing me. I will rise up to the moment and I won't stay the same. That's my decree. Burning like a flame, I'm coming a train, I'm coming your way, your way. Thunder with the rain, I'm flooding your game, start running away, away. Battle through the pain, transforming the game, I'm storming your way, your way. And I won't stay the same as my decree.
"40 contenders, 7 rounds. The road to the Coke Series ends here."
I cannot be defeated. I can take off, I don't need a reason. Anyone that see me sweating, bleeding, I'm about to take off, can't believe it, can't believe it. I cannot be stopped, no, no. I cannot be stopped, no, no. I cannot be stopped, no, no. I cannot be stopped, no, no.
Good evening, race fans, and welcome to iRacing's coverage of the 5th race of the 2022 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, live from the virtual Dover Motor Speedway in Dover, Delaware. James Pike alongside Blake McCandless as you get a good look at Miles the Monster as we pay a visit to him in the Contender Series for 2022 as we do the concrete of this mile facility. And Blake, this place, when I think of Dover, anytime we come here, it's just speed, speed, speed. And I think in particular, relative speed compared to a lot of the other places we go to. Yes, you might be going 190, 200 miles an hour at a Daytona or Talladega, but this is a place where even though you might not be traveling as fast in a numerical sense, it feels faster because there's so much banking and you fly around this place.
Yeah, there's a lot of banking that helps you here, James. And not only do you feel like you're going fast, things happen quickly here. When you come off of turn 2, when you're down the back straightaway, how narrow this place is, how compact it is, things happen quickly. You have to be on your toes as we take a look here at the Dover Motor Speedway and just... It is one of those tracks, James, that is going to challenge you because of how you fall down the banking, how much speed you have to carry, and how much you have to be dialed in on your setup. It's very easy to miss for these drivers, but when you hit it well, you're going to be able to make a lot of passes and use a lot of the racetrack that we have here in these corners with these 24 degrees of banking.
A circuit that opened up over 50 years ago. It originally was a combination horse racing circuit and what was that an asphalt oval for race cars was paved with concrete in 1995, but a quick place at that. Here's a look at the schedule for this 2022 Contender Series season. We've already been to Phoenix, Homestead, Miami Auto Club, and Nashville, Dover tonight, and then Darlington and Texas Motor Speedway to round out the calendar. And by the time we hit the end of the night on December 20th, we will know the 20 drivers that will advance into the Contender, or rather the Coke Series for 2023. And speaking of, here's a look at the top 20 in points entering this evening. Joey Brown has been on a rampage, to say the least. 3 wins in a row entering tonight at Dover, but lots of drivers here that are making some noise, and some new faces here in the top 20 as well, Blake.
That's certainly the case, James, and that's what I love seeing about this Contender Series. Who's going to rise to the occasion? We see a lot of names who were in the Coke Series last year and in previous years right now. Caden Honeycutt, Colin Keister, Derek Justice coming back for a third time potentially. But look at some new names that you have up here. Jordy Lopez Jr., Wyatt Tinsley, Timmy Holmes, a couple of those names that are surprising and hopefully impressing team owners, James, because that's the other side of this. You don't want to just make this series. The higher you finish up, guess what? Those teams are going to come calling when the free agency period starts here after we determine our 20 drivers.
Will make for a very fun beginning of January when we get to that point. Here's a look at the flip side. These are the drivers that are currently on the outside looking in, and the most notable point that I pick up when I see this, there are 6 drivers that are currently on the outside after being in the Coke Series last year, and arguably the biggest of them all, Blake, 4-time eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series champion Ray Alfalla, 29 points back at the cut line.
Well, and James, unfortunately for Ray, it hasn't necessarily been bad luck. You know, sometimes you run into that in this Contender Series. It is just pure, flat-out been a lack of speed that Ray has just not possessed, and we have never seen that in all of his years of being the top fleet or even getting knocked down to this Contender Series over the years. He has never struggled quite like he has here, and again, it's been just complete lack of pace, unfortunately, for Ray, and he has to figure it out quickly here with just 3 races left, or we will have a Coke Series season in 2023 that does not have Ray Alfalla. That's almost hard to believe that we're saying, but that's how the competition level each year we go through here in iRacing just continues to pick up.
The mailman will have to find a way to deliver this evening. However, this is a track that traditionally has suited him well. He is a driver that likes the high horsepower, high grip combinations where you have to really drive it with the rear tires in particular. Dover most certainly qualifies as a place where you have to be just as mindful of the rear end of the car as you do the front in order to maximize your lap times.
Well, it looks like right there he may have gotten a lap in, but I don't think it's quite where he wanted it to be. He pulled off after just 1 lap, which is pretty typical here. I don't think that you're going to have your second lap be a lot quicker here. So tough there for Ray, but at least for the lap times that we're seeing, James, not another good qualifying effort, at least so far. We have about 16 times in. Ray is 15th right now.
Before we get going with the race this evening, we'll remind you that you can head to worldofoutlaws.game.com to pick up your copy of World of Outlaws Dirt Racing, which is available now for the Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Series S, the PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5. The Big Block Modified and Wheatland, Missouri's Lucas Oil Speedway arrived as downloadable content just a few weeks ago, and a lot of drivers having a lot of fun making some laps in World of Outlaws Dirt Racing. I, too, count myself among that bunch, trying to get past the regional level with the sprint car, but it's a lot of fun. So if you want to change the pace a little bit, that game developed by Monster Games and iRacing, lots of fun if you want to change of pace. Likewise, the iRacing holiday sale is currently ongoing. 25% off of renewals of 12 or 24 months and 50% off of new memberships. Those renewals will be available through December 16th. The new memberships you can find through January 8th, and you can visit iRacing.com/holiday-sale to pick up your deal and pick up one of the best values in renewals of subscriptions today.
You know, James, I would take advantage of this, but I already did it for Thanksgiving, so we at least got
the Black Friday sale, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it was the same discount, 25% off of a renewal of, what was it, 2 years? So got to take advantage of it there, but if you didn't, you get a second chance.
Yeah, I chuckled a little bit when I finished off the process and saw on the screen that my account is good now until 2025. So you can lock in for a long time and just not have to worry about that and focus on driving and focus on getting the most out of your race car, which is what a lot of our drivers are currently doing. A lot of folks trying to knock out some fast laps in the final minute of qualifying. Casey Tucker to third on the board. You see on your screens now, so likely a pretty solid starting spot for him. Here's Malik Ray trying to push on in the Simpsons car. He's yet to make a lap under time at this point, but we'll see where Malik lands and be ready to bring you the starting grid here in just about half a minute or so.
One thing I'm really looking forward to in this race, James, is how these drivers approach this race. We've had the exact same schedule as we did last year in the Contender Series this year, but the race lengths have all been different except for this race. This is the only race that, carrying over directly from last year, was the exact same length, 120 laps last year, 120 laps as well this year. Now, we ended up having fuel mileage come into play. We had a wreck. Golly, I think it was about 45 laps or into the race, and we ended up having what was our only fuel mileage race of the year here at Dover. Something you wouldn't think of seeing, but nevertheless, it can happen as it looks like qualifying has wrapped up.
This is a place where sometimes fuel mileage has made the difference, sometimes it hasn't. It just depends on how the race goes, but it is time to bring you our starting grid for this evening's fifth race of 7 in the 2022 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, which is Colin Keister top of the board with a fast time of 22.571 seconds to take pole over last week's winner, Joey Brown. Casey Tucker and Caden Honeycutt will roll off third and fourth. Vicente Salas completes the top 5. Jordy Lopez Jr. for Altus Esports starts 6th.
Starting in the 7th position, you could see Malik Ray got that lap in late, but it was good. Dylan Alt starting alongside him in row number 4. Then you have Tucker Minter and Daniel Buttafuoco that will make up row number 5. And then how about Brandon Kissick? A solid effort for him, and Boyd Hogan, 11th and 12th.
Taylor Hurst and Andrew Navarre rolling on from 13th and 14th. 15th on the grid is North Force Racing's Wyatt Tinsley. He's joined on the outside of row 8 by Altus Esports' Seth DeMerchant, who is also the first driver on the outside coming into tonight, 21st in points. Alan Bowes from Dead Zone Racing and Brendan Kohler from Elliott Sadler Esports starting 17th and 18th respectively.
Two very interesting cases here, James. Drivers who are right around that cut line starting in row 10, and Michael Cozy Jr. and Kevin King. Parker White looked to be dominant last week before pitting late and getting some damage in that race. Derek Justice will start alongside him. And another row of teammates just behind Ryan Doucette and James Wenzel in row 12.
Row 13 includes North Force Racing's Thunder Dad Daniel Falkingham starting alongside Legacy Esports' Christopher Pfeffer. Christopher Hill starts this evening from 27th from Altus Esports. Colin Bowden from eRacer starts 28th. Cody Bias and Blade Witt complete our top 30.
Back here in 31st, Tyler Gary just not able to get the lap time, much like his teammates further up the road. Brian Mercurio, a former Coke Series driver last year, he's been struggling here, and he is not in a good starting spot. You see the rest of the field come across. And how about Derek Bordeaux, who is nearly locked in, James? I mean, he is far up the road in terms of points, did not put a time down in qualifying. Only driver out of our 39 to show up to do so. Kyle Myers, the 40th driver with a Pro Series license that is eligible, not in attendance tonight.
quick note on the in-sim weather before we go racing. The in-sim day is March 1st, 2023, a Friday, right around 12:45 p.m. local time. Air temp is 71 degrees Fahrenheit, track temp 86 degrees Fahrenheit, winds headed to the southwest at 7 miles an hour, and 49% humidity. We're not terribly far away from the Atlantic Ocean or the Chesapeake Bay here, so not a huge surprise to see that number maybe a little bit higher than you would expect for this time of year as these drivers get set to go racing from Dover in what will be a pivotal race to help determine which 20 drivers will make their way into the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series for 2023. Colin Keister stands on the gas pedal. Barney the flagman waves the green flag over the field, and they bounce off of each other before we even get to turn one. They're 4 and 5 wide, just a little bit further back in the field as somebody missed the restart there, Blake. I couldn't tell who, but it was calamitous there down the front stretch to start things off.
It was Daniel Buttafuoco who checked up a little bit early. They stacked up on the outside. Boyd Hogan ran right into the back of him. And so early on here, James, you have a ton of drivers who are going to have a little bit of nose damage. And we saw this last year. I was a victim of it myself. You get any nose damage on this car, you may have to pit because these drivers, especially here at Dover, you think about the high RPMs that you're running all the way around this racetrack. You have to push that tape, that engine all the way to the edge. So I imagine we're going to see a couple of drivers here the next handful of laps that are going to have to pit on lap 2 or 3 of this race.
It all bleeds into what we talked about at the top of the broadcast about how this place runs quickly. You're right with regards to the high RPMs. The engine never really has the chance to settle. You're not off throttle all that much as you look off the rear window of Frostburg, Maryland's Colin Keister. This is home turf for him, his closest track to his front door. So not a huge surprise, I would think, to see him up front, especially when you consider he's the defending champion of the Contender Series as well. But Blake, you're absolutely right. Lots of drivers going to be worried about damage and aero damage too. The RPMs, I would argue, are probably the bigger concern, but aero damage can also play to things here as well.
Well, and Seth the Merchant probably got the worst end of it. He doesn't even have a nose on his race car right now. And looking just kind of at the replay, James, it looked like Boyd Hogan kind of pushed Daniel Buttafuoco through the restart zone. And he's probably getting a call from a spotter, hey, guess what, go, go, go. And you can't see up the road very well if you're right on somebody. So Buttafuoco checks up, and Boyd Hogan just drives through him. And unfortunately, you have a lot of guys who have damage. Seth the Merchant, Alan Bowe's got a piece of it, Michael Cozy Jr., and now you're seeing the Merchant. He's having to get out of line. He's having to get some clean air and will likely have to pit, I would say, soon, or else that car's going to blow up.
So here's a look at the stack up where everything you see Jordi Lopez and Daniel Buttafuoco and company all having to check up as we take the green flag, and there was just nothing that Seth the Merchant could have done. And here are some of the drivers that had the damage, like you talked about, Blake, coming to pit road for service.
Man, and just tough luck there for Seth the Merchant. He also has to, or he actually stays out, but you have Brendan Kohler, you have Andrew Navarro who have made their way to pit lane. That's tough for Seth the Merchant. He was just outside the cut line. He was 21st in the standings coming into this race, and already before they even get to the green flag of this one to start lap number 1, he's already well behind, and he is off the pace right now. Trying
to see whether or not this finish would constitute as his drop for this series. Drivers have the ability to drop their worst finish of the Contender Series campaign and have it not count against points. I believe if he finished towards the back where he is, that it would be, and it certainly would not help his case. But there is, if ever there is a silver lining to the situation, if you have something like this where you end up in trouble early and you have a bad result, you can effectively have it wiped away and not count against you in the final tally. However, it removes your margin for error in the final 2 races, and if you end up finishing 40th or somewhere deep in the field at Darlington or Texas, then that will count against you and will hurt your campaign to make Coke ultimately.
Heck, Ryan Doucette got into the wall in 1 and 2. Scraped the outside wall, lost a ton of positions. He had a little bit of damage as well. But he went up there and made contact. I thought he was using that as a racing line, but he definitely made some moves there. Ray Alfala, somebody else who's making moves, and probably a beneficiary of being in the back, not being around where that stack-up was. He's up 13 spots here in these opening laps. So Ray Alfala done himself a nice job to try and get some points here, and other Altus drivers on the pit lane.
That is Ryan Doucette, who just lost it in the marbles entering turn one and got the fence, and now he's down on pit road with damage to the right side of his car and the front of his car after that initial stack up on the restart. A good point, though, I think, about Ray Alfalo, though, that he was so deep in the field that he managed to miss all of that, and as the drivers who have run into trouble early have had to come down pit road, he's gained spots. So you think about how his race has gone. He's one of the hardest chargers so far, started 30-30, he's already up to 20th.
He's done a great job, and we know how sensitive these cars are to damage with how close everybody is on speed, how these setups are so similar, yet they're open. Just the littlest bit of damage, as you talked about, a little bit of aero damage or any damage on the nose where you're going to have to take off some tape, that will cost you speed. These drivers, they're so close at this level. Just having a little bit of damage on your right front fender or on the nose anywhere on this car, definitely going to play a factor, and these drivers knew it in the trucks as well, as Ray Alfalo just made a pass by Michael Cozy Jr. for 19th.
Good look here on your screens at two teammates at North Force Racing, Wyatt Tinsley and Daniel Buttafuoco, as we're about to go get a good look here at Jordy Lopez from Altus Esports working with teammates. And I suppose we have a theme there because you see it's another Altus car up in front of him. We can't entirely tell which Altus Esports car that Jordy is following. Believe it may be Tucker Minter, looking at timing and scoring. But you can see drivers already trying to pair off with their teammates, work together, just knock out laps. Doesn't seem like we have too many people pushing for positions up front. Seems like everybody just wants to make sure that they survive the opening stint of this race, because Dover is a place where you're racing the track almost as much as you're racing the competition.
Well, that's the theme of this series, James, is, when you get to the Coke Series level and you're fighting for points, you're fighting to get into the playoffs, you're fighting for a lot more money on the line, every single position matters, and you just don't have that in this series right now. If you finish 20th in the standings or first in the standings, guess what? You've reached the goal. You've reached the promised land. You're going to be in the Coke Series next year. And so these drivers that are up front, you think about a Colin Keister who's about 8th in the points. He just needs a good point stay, so he's not going to push the issue in the lead. In the top 5, a lot of these drivers just need to stay where they are, and they would take it and be okay with it. So usually up front, this is kind of the name of the game in this series, that you're not going to push the issue all too much.
Because it's just the top 20 that you need. You don't necessarily have to be the first of 20, just so long as you're in the top 20. That's all you need to make it into the Coke Series for 23. Here's Wyatt Tinsley and Daniel Buttafuoco. We were talking about them just a few moments ago, and we'll take a moment to highlight their efforts, because North Force Racing has had a really strong campaign through the first 4 races of the Contender Series. We saw Wyatt Tinsley and his teammate Parker White just about attached at the hip, it seemed like, all the way through the qualifying series in the spring, the summer, and the early part of this fall, and that's continued throughout this Contender Series. Tinsley and Parker White, both in the top 20 in points. They're trying to help out Buttafuoco, who is outside the top 20, but still working his way in. But it's been a really solid campaign for North Force Racing, and when you consider Derek Justice as part of that operation as well, it would appear that they are likely going to get at least one, if not more, drivers into the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series for 2023.
James, I've been so impressed with the team last year that I called home in North Force Racing, only because when you look at the other teams that we have in this field, when you look at the dead zones, when you look at Legacy Esports, you don't often see a lot of turnover. Of course, drivers will change their affiliations and change teams year after year, but North Force Racing did nearly a complete overhaul. Aside from Derek Justice, Derek is the only driver that was here last year. North Force Racing took on an entirely different driver lineup. Wyatt Tinsley, Tyler Gary, Daniel Falkingham, Daniel Buttafuoco, an entirely different lineup, and yet they're making it work. Parker White's a part of it as well. You can see the damage that Parker White has right now, but it's not often that you see so much turnover, but yet they have come out and not only kept the speed that they had last year with Colin Keister when he was a champion, or Isaac Gann the previous year when they were a champion. They have continued to build on that despite having an entirely different driver lineup.
I spoke with their competition director, Presley Gilson, earlier, and he mentioned to me that he wanted to sort of come up with a more selective process, that he didn't necessarily want everybody that was quick, but that he wanted a group of drivers that work well together, that practice and find tweaks and setups easily, that just gel with each other so that there's a good culture and a good atmosphere and vibe around this program. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that in competition as you ride on board with Derek Justice. You mentioned Parker White, just trying to follow Justice as he peeks his way to the inside of another driver for, I believe that should be 15th that he gets around Boyd
Oh,
Hogan.
Hogan got the wall when Justice got by him. He got the wall off at turn 4.
So trouble for Boyd Hogan at a Legacy Esports. You may be sliding back to the field. We'll see whether or not it affects him as much as it did Ryan Doucette, but something that we'll certainly need to watch. But you can see, just watching the onboard here of Justice, this place is surprisingly bumpy as well. It's not exactly a smooth as glass track.
Oh, no, certainly not. It is a tough ride around Dover, as anybody will tell you that's been around this racetrack, James.
As we settle into tonight's race, we will quiet ourselves so you all can hear all the action from the Dover Motor Speedway as we go iRacing full throttle. Colin Keister beginning to stretch out his lead to the tune of 0.7 of a second as we remind you that if you want all the latest news and updates from eNASCAR, you can take out your mobile device and take a picture of the QR code and sign up today at the link that will take you to, courtesy of iRacing, the official simulation partner of NASCAR. Also a reminder that the D-Box eNASCAR International iRacing Series powered by Digital Motorsports comes off the back of a wild finish at Daytona, which saw Ryan Vargas go to victory lane amongst a handful of drivers that were at the Sim Racing Expo, the Nürburgring. They rolled on to the virtual circuit Zolder in Belgium. You can see that broadcast on enascar.com/live on December 13th at 6 p.m. Eastern or 2300 GMT for our European contingent following along to tonight's broadcast. Lots of battles here, middle of the pack. This is Kevin King, Wyatt Tinsley, Parker White and company for 15th, 16th, and 17th. And for as much as we said the drivers up front are trying to just ride a little bit, seems like this group, Blake, may be a little bit more antsy than some of their contenders up racing in the top 5, top 10.
Well, they have every reason to be. This is kind of where you don't want to be, around this 20th place spot that a lot of these drivers are not only in on track, but they're close to that in the standings as well. Kevin King, somebody that is 16th right now in the points. He's 16 to the good and is helping himself right now with 15th, but is trying to race his way up into the top 20. Colin Bowden, who's just a couple of cars back, started 28th. He's up to 19th. Cody Bias, 29th to 19th. So this is kind of that middle area where you see a lot of aggressive racing in this series. I would know because, one, I was in it, but two, I was usually even further back. But these guys, I would say, almost race harder in the mid and the back of the field than probably anywhere, just because of how desperate you start to get, knowing that when you're here and you only have 6 races of points to count and to prove yourself, you can't afford bad finishes. You can only really afford one, and that's your drop.
Good look at Joey Brown, who's just been quick as ever, your current points leader and the most successful driver to this point in the 2022 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. He's got prior experience in the Coke Series and took a break and let himself go back to being in the officials for a few years, and decided this year to make a campaign to get back up into the Coke Series, and he stormed through the qualifying series. He's doing the same to Contender. Here's James Wenzel out of Burlington, Wisconsin, one of the many drivers for Altus Esports, but very much in the thick of things. Currently scored in the 29th position, trying to figure out who's going to be the person to follow between Tyler Gary, Christopher Pfeffer, and Blade Witt, who are racing just ahead of him.
Wenzel right now side by side. We're seeing one driver. I think that's Christopher Pfeffer. He scraped the wall a couple of times. You could see the smoke, which I think this is part of kind of a build day, James, right? That we had updates coming out on the iRacing service today, and I think that smoke when Pfeffer was scraping the wall there on the straightaways, that's something that I think is brand new with this update, or at least I haven't seen it yet, that pronounced. So I think that's one of those things that's new for these drivers, and that was difficult, I'm sure, for a lot of these drivers, because when you have a build day, guess what? You're always wondering, is there going to be something that's different? These drivers take all the time they can to prepare for all these races and take all their time to test and do their laps, but then you have a race day on the same day that everything is getting updated in the sim. That can be stressful because you don't know if something's going to change. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but you just never really know until it's fully out there. And at least from what I'm hearing from these drivers today, there hasn't been a whole lot that changed, or at least would have altered anything with their setups.
A lot of the updates in this build were more on the road side of things. The BMW M and the Mercedes W13 arriving on the sim today. Lots of fun. I've had the chance to wheel both of those machines and had a good time. Here's Briar LaPrade from Manchester, Tennessee, working his way through the pack. But yeah, a few little bits and pieces that end up popping up that are new every day, and I almost liken it to something that you'd see in the real world, where sometimes you don't necessarily have much experience at a track or with a certain setup. You need a little bit of extra practice. If you know you've got a new build, you try and build in a little bit of time on the front end just to go through your systems and check and make sure that everything feels the same, so that when you get to race day, you're able to attack and go after it the same way you would before the updates arrived.
I see Brendan Kohler here kind of leaning into the corners a little bit easier to do here at Dover especially. But Kohler kind of had a little bit of a resurgence these last couple of weeks, got within 10 of the cut line, but he was a part of that group that had to pit early on because of the damage. He's 2 laps down right now in 35th, so this is one of the worst feelings when there's really nothing you can do but just ride around, make laps, and just hope that the talented field around you just continues to have issues. You want to see chaos, you want to see wrecks at this point, but it's just so rare in this series that it actually happens.
Usually clean and green, but then again, that's sort of the point here when you consider that there's not a single driver in this field with an I rating that is south of 6,400. I think the lowest, I take that back, Colin Bowden is at 60, but everybody in this field is at least a 6,000 I rating or higher, the measure that iRacing uses to roughly judge driver skill. And I think given that I think that I sit at like a 2,500 personally, and I've done my fair share of racing, but it underscores just how difficult it is to even get to this series. Never mind the fact you have to run through the qualifying series as well.
It's tough, and when you go back into the series, and I think Ray Alfala is probably experiencing that more than anybody right now. We talked about he had raced his way up into the top 20. Well, right now Ray is on the way backwards as he was battling Michael Cozy Jr. A little bit earlier on in the night, about 20 laps ago, and he's already fallen back to 25th, and the cars are starting to line up behind him. So you talk about going down to this series and having to face all the competition that is up and coming on this service, James. I think that's one thing that a lot of these Coke Series drivers, a lot of these guys who run up in the top splits of Rotopro, they're not always on the service racing and officials because they're working on their setups, they're working on perfecting their craft, and sometimes they get a little bit humbled when they get into this level and they experience the challenges against these guys that are just on the service all the time.
is Vicente Salmas out of Temecula, California, trying to race his way back into the Coke Series for 2023 after picking up a victory at his rookie campaign 2 years ago at Richmond Raceway, one of the brighter talents on the oval side of the sim, but he's got a whole rear bumper just full of Malik Ray, who himself is also a veteran of the Coke Series, trying to race his way back in. As Malik will check up just a hair, Vicente will be able to get back in line, and now Malik is going to have to fight off one of the Altus Esports machines. And Dylan Olm and Casey Tucker there as we'll go on board with Jordi Lopez Jr., and you'll see just how tricky it is to navigate this circuit and just how much banking there is.
That's why this place is so fast, James. There's so much banking here, and you even look at the restart zone, and when that comes up, and this is probably one of the more difficult tracks to restart on. And as we work around to turns 3 and 4, James, this is probably one of the most difficult places that we have on the NASCAR circuit that you have to pit. You can see how much speed you're carrying, how narrow the racing groove is, and then there's the pit down there all the way on the flat. You have to get down to what would be even slower than anywhere else that we go to on the circuit, down to 40 miles per hour, I believe it is in the sim, and that is just crawling. This is one of the most difficult places to get on pit road. We saw at Nashville Super Speedway, a couple of drivers had some issues getting onto pit road, running into each other and whatnot, didn't bring out a caution, but that's something that as we get towards the midpoint in these next 10 laps or so, as drivers want to short pit their competition or perhaps go a little bit further, calling out the pit road, that's probably one of the more likely scenarios where we would see a yellow flag in this one.
If you want a good sense of pronounce the banking is at Dover, look at this onboard here with Jordi Lopez, and you really get a sense, especially with the way the camera moves as he transitions on the straightaways into the banking. This is how high the banking is at Dover. This is what these drivers are working with, and this is how tricky the transitions can be. You can see Tucker Minter got a little bit loose out of corner number 4, but this place is by no means a New Hampshire or Phoenix. It is not a flat track here at Dover, far from it.
No, and talk to anybody who's run here. They talk about literally falling in the corners right there because of how far down the banking is and how much it increases as you get into the corner. You even see it on the camera, a little bit of a dip right there, and that's just typical Dover Motor Speedway, that you go on the straightaways and just literally fall down into the corner.
Battle here right on the edge of the top 10. Lots of drivers that have been fighting throughout this race and have been around each other for a good chunk of it too. Caden Honeycutt, Daniel Botafuco, Alan Bose, Derek Justice racing for 10th through 13th. A little bit of side-by-side action there between Bose and Justice for the back. Botafuco and Honeycutt maybe trying to just distance himself ever so slightly, as I think Honeycutt got the fence out of 4. Got too tight on corner exit, Blake, maybe?
Yeah, I think that was his own doing. He may have tagged the right rear on the wall, and it kind of brought him and brushed him back against it. And unfortunately for Honeycutt, gets some damage there, is able to save it, no caution flag, but again, we know how sensitive these cars are and have been in this series to any amount of damage that you get, and I think Honeycutt's going to be feeling the brunt of it here as he loses a handful of spots. He was battling up towards the top 5 not too long ago, and now finds himself in 13th and maybe falling even further.
How much does the damage affect Honeycutt's machine, and what happens to that car and the driver out of Aledo, Texas, as we get a good look at the replay and find out what really did happen coming off of turn number 4. And you're right, yeah, actually got loose with the rear end. Didn't get tight, but the rear end stepped out from underneath him, and he did make contact with the right rear quarter panel of his Toyota Supra. And so now we'll have to watch and see how many spots he falls back. Already back to the 14th position. And remember, he was racing for a spot right at the edge of the top 10 only a few laps ago. So the question, Blake, given that you've got the driving experience here, is that an overheating of the tires because he was so loose on quarter exit, or is that aero damage, or maybe a combination of both that's affecting Honeycutt's car?
Well, looking at a lot of the cars that come out of that staple, I would think it's almost kind of just a setup-wide issue in general. If you look at Brandon McKissick, Casey Tucker, Caden Honeycutt, Ray Alfala, if you want to add them, they're all losing spots right now. So I think everybody is just fighting loose on corner exit, especially in that camp right now. And again, that's one of the interesting things about this series, that you have really about 6 or 7 teams that kind of make up the bulk of what everybody's running, and you can quite literally see who has the short run speed, who has the long run speed, and right now I think Honeycutt and Legacy right now they're just struggling a little bit on the long run.
Legacy may be better suited for a short run car. Might want a yellow here towards the end of this race, as we remind you that the holiday sale is ongoing as drivers come down for their first pit stops of this race. 50% off of all new memberships through January 8th and 25% off of renewals of 12 and 24 months now through December 16th when you head to iRacing.com/holiday-sale. Many cars coming down pit road now, including your race leader, Colin Keister. But you see the freight train making their way down onto pit road, 35 miles an hour, the speed limit. You are crawling down the front stretch here when you are working your way towards your pit stall at Dover.
Well, you're crawling, and man, these drivers, I mean, they are drifting, trying to get every little bit of speed that they can onto pit road right now. The only black flag I've seen was from Derek Bordeaux, who is just, I mean, he's had a tough one. He didn't put down a lap in qualifying. He's the only one I can see right now serving a penalty on pit road. But these guys, I mean, they get up on the wheel when they enter pit road, and there's probably perhaps not anybody that's a better example of that typically than Malik Ray. But for right now, he'll stay out and continue to run around this Dover Motor Speedway with the race lead just past the halfway point.
More cars on pit road.
Kevin
Alan
King, black
Bose.
flag.
Kevin King, black flag. That will knock him out of, believe, the top 15. I think is where he was before this cycle began. Meanwhile, Malik Ray coming down onto pit road and sliding, drifting. He's not the first person that we've seen just go a little bit sideways on entry and then to lock the brakes up, as we'll get a replay here and see maybe what happened to Kevin King and find out what was the problem with his machine.
We will see right here off of turn 3. Seems to be taking a good line right here, and we've seen a lot of cars kind of drifting to the line, and I mean, you could see the closing rate with Alan Bose right in front of him. That was just too much, and like pitting in real life, James, there's a little bit of a give right here. It's not exactly what speed you're going. There's timing lines. You can give a little bit of it back, but unfortunately, if you carry too much speed, you're going to blow right through that timing line, and unfortunately, King does that, and he's still sitting on pit road, so a very tough break for somebody who was in a really good spot, James. This is why we talk about these drivers who are conservative, and they don't like to race very hard up at the front of the field when they're in a good point situation. King, if he gives a little bit of time right there on pit entry, he's probably okay. Maybe he loses a spot, but the last thing you want to do is lose 15 or 20 spots, which is what happened here. So he's going to come out here almost 3 laps down in 37th position. So a tough break there for King, who's been on the money, at least as far as these last few races are concerned.
Entered this evening 15 points to the good of that 20th position cutoff line, and now will likely be using this race as his drop as you get a good look at Winston-Salem, North Carolina's Taylor Hurst, veteran of the Coke Series from 2022, who is one of 5 drivers that have yet to come down pit road for service, and I would suspect these drivers all just trying to wait it out and see if they can catch a lucky break and get a caution that might reset their pit strategy entirely.
It's definitely the case. Remember, Boyd Hogan was a part of that incident on lap 1. Ray Alfala seemed to lose the handle on that car over the long run, and pretty much every single race has kind of implored this. I hope we get a caution strategy, and it's effective here at Dover, James, because you lose so much time. If you don't pit, you're at least an entire lap ahead of most everybody. So they're just going to stay out here and try to go as long as they can. They could probably go anywhere from 10 to 15 more laps, I'd say, is about as far as you could push it. But you never know. We've seen crazy things happen in these races. But right now, Hurst, Hogan, Alfala, and a couple others just hoping that they can try to get a caution here.
Witt and Jonathan Delaney, the other 2, all of them yet to come down for service, but the one that sticks out to me, the one that you've talked about a little bit this evening, Ray Alfala, I won't necessarily call this a Hail Mary, but boy, it definitely feels like some sort of strategy from him to try and stay out and get the track position and maybe get the yellow that he needs to reset not only his race but potentially his Contender Series chances as well. Something that we will keep track of over the course of the next 10 to 15 laps as this race progresses. As it moves along, we will take a quick break and be back with more action on the other side from the Dover Motor Speedway. This is iRacing's coverage of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series.
It doesn't matter where you're from, who you grew up rooting for, what you grew up watching, your home track, your favorite car, the series you've always wanted to race in. When you're ready to know what it's like, we're here, bringing you as close to the action as it gets with the ultimate sim racing experience. With a community of hundreds of thousands just like you. This is iRacing, and here, every day is race day.
Rated E10 for ages 10 and up.
You wanted the best, you got them for a rest. Often imitated, never duplicated. The greatest show on dirt, the World of Outlaws. World of Outlaws Dirt Racing is available now.
Welcome back to iRacing's coverage of the 2022 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, round 5 of 7. Already halfway through the books of the virtual Dover Motor Speedway in Dover, Delaware, and it has been Colin Keister who has paced the field that is on the regular strategy. However, we have 4 drivers that have stayed out and have yet to come down pit road. Taylor Hurst, Ray Alfalla, Blade Witt, and Jonathan Delaney. They currently represent our top 4 drivers in the running order, and Keister is the first driver who's already come down pit road. He currently runs in the 5th position, followed closely by Joey Brown, who's won 3 races already in this Contender Series season, and Tucker Minter for Altus Esports. So a mixture of strategies at the front, but we're seeing this field space out a little more. The other thing I'm noticing, Blake McCandless, seeing a few variations in pace. Some drivers with speed, some drivers on old tires, some drivers on fresh tires, and especially in a place like this where the track is relatively narrow, that's a scary thing that you have to work through, because sometimes you misjudge somebody's closing rate, you misjudge gaps, distances, and all of a sudden you end up in big trouble very, very quickly as we look on board Quebec's Derek Bordeaux.
Well, and how much slower traffic can kind of affect you, because here at Dover you're using every inch of the racetrack, especially on corner exit as you're trying to get by somebody. So trying to time out when you make your passes and how you're able to do them, when you're able to catch lap traffic. If you catch them in a bad spot, how much time is that going to lose you, and can you make up some time if you pit a little bit later and decided to stretch it out? Can you run them back down on your fresh tires, and how important that track position is? So it looks like things are starting to sort out a little bit. We still have, as you mentioned, those 4 drivers. They are still out on the racetrack. Taylor Hurst, Blade Witt, Ray Alfalla, and Jonathan Delaney. They have to be at the edge of their fuel window, I would imagine. And again, just hoping that, you know, like you were saying with that chaos, that something comes out of it. Somebody has an issue and spins out and gives them basically a mulligan to try and run out the last 40-some-odd laps of this race from the race lead.
The number that I'm looking at on live timing and scoring is the gap between our leader, Taylor Hurst, and the first driver who's already come down pit road, Colin Keister. It looks like Jonathan Delaney is going to come in for service. But the gap to the leader from Keister, who now goes up to 4th, is 9.7 seconds. If Keister can run that gap all the way down and pass Taylor Hurst on track for the race lead, it effectively nullifies the entire strategy from Hurst and Witt and Alfalla and company. And I would think in short order we would see them come down pit road if they lose the track position and fall out of those top 3 positions.
And sometimes you just have to do this. I remember Nashville Super Speedway last year. This is the exact same thing I did because I knew I wasn't fast enough to compete at that track that night, and it just ended up working out. We ended up getting a caution, so Hurst, Witt, Alfala, they are going to stick with this strategy to the very end. They've made their bed. They have to lie in it, and as we say that, Alfala going to make his way onto pit road. He may have scraped the barrels. He did, and he has required repairs as a result of that contact. So Ray Alfala with a meatball flag on his pit stop, so it goes from bad to worse here for Ray Alfala.
Not the race that Ray Alfala needed to try and cement his place back in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series for 2023. Here's a good look at Dylan Alt from Elliott Sadler Esports, who has had a relatively quiet evening, but a solid evening, and maybe not a huge surprise when we consider that 1 year ago we came here and it was Dylan Alt who went to victory lane. There's Taylor Hurst now coming down to pit road, so it is Blade Witt who is the last driver yet to come down for service. He is ahead of Colin Keister by 3.5 seconds. You see Keister really trying to work over the lap traffic there at Boyd Hogan.
Not only that, look at Joey Brown and how close he is, that he's gained some time on Colin Keister in the midst of that cycles. We'll take one more look here at Ray Alfala's pit entry. Down here at the bottom of 3 and 4, it seems like everybody's getting just absolutely sideways. We're going to see a good vantage point right here. Those barrels barely stick out, and just enough, James, to affect that car. You think you kind of see the tail slap a little bit on that rear end of that car, but he is back out on the racetrack, so the required repairs must have been pretty minimal, but nevertheless, just not a season to write home about for Ray Alfala.
Could be a big storyline to watch as we close out the Contender Series later on this month. Meanwhile, really good battle there between your top two as Blade Witt comes down pit road and Colin Keister and Joey Brown now resume their fight at the front. But look at this, Keister, Brown, and Tucker Minter trying to close the gap between these two. It's 2.4 seconds from Keister to Minter, but Joey Brown is right there. And not a huge surprise to see the most successful driver up to this point in the campaign racing the defending champion of the Contender Series for the top spot at Dover Motor Speedway.
The thing is, Joey Brown is so high up in the points right now, and his drop is such a good race. I mean, he's essentially locked in right now. I'm even looking at a chart that has him locked in. If he were to hit the wall and retire or disconnect from this race, he would still earn enough points that with 2 races left in the season, he would be locked in to the Hoop Series unofficially for next year. Colin Keister not quite in that advantageous of a position, but 31 points above the cut line coming in. Safe to say if Keister can hold on and win this race, he's in a pretty good position. Blaze Crawford, somebody who is, and this is one of the tougher things to do, James, is to recover after a really bad start in this series. It's so easy to get bogged down and overthink things, and once things go wrong in the first race or two, it's easy to kind of get beat down by that. But Blaze Crawford, a tough start to this Contender Series, and right now he's 2 points out, but trying to make up a little bit of ground and put himself in the right column. He's doing a solid job of that tonight.
On board with Tyler Gary out of Royal Palm Beach, Florida, trying to race his way from South Florida into the Coke Series for 2023. He was 23 points above the cut line, incidentally, entering today. And from Tyler Gary, we shuffle on to Parker White out of Maine, who, like his teammate Wyatt Tinsley, just had a really solid season. Ninth in the standings, 28 points to the good entering this evening, though that does not reflect the run that he had at Nashville last week. Got caught up in an incident and had a poorer finish than I think he would have liked. Ryan Doucette out of Massachusetts. Remember, he had that trouble early on in the race, and then to come down pit road, he's 2 laps down in the 36th position. This will likely end up being his drop of the Contender Series for 2022.
A tough position to be in. Came in 12 above the cut line, and he has a lot of work to do to try and get himself in the right spot with just 2 races left to go. But Colin Keister, Joey Brown, this battle for the race lead, James, has not settled down, and now you have a little bit of lap traffic that is just up the road from Colin Keister. It's in the form of Kevin King, who is pretty quick right now on some fresher tires, but even Christopher Hill falling a little bit further back. So Keister and Brown trying to manage this situation, but Brown has not alleviated any of the pressure he's applying to Colin Keister right now.
Lots of competition that is just all right in the mix, trying to not be in the way, but could end up being part of the equation as these laps wind down. Kevin King and Christopher Hill, the next 2 cars. And then there's a bit of a gap to Ryan Doucette, somewhere in the ballpark of, I would call it maybe 4 or 5 seconds. So there's some time if you can get clear of those 2 cars. We'll just have to see how Keister and Brown decide to work together, or maybe they decide to just race each other and see what happens over the course of the final 25 laps.
I mean, I know, knowing Colin Keister, he's not one that's just going to lay over and give it to Joey Brown. He's going to make him earn it. But again, I think you just have to think about the type of situation you're in. I mean, Joey Brown, he kind of has really nothing to lose here, James, other than the fact that, as we talked about at the top of the show, He's not trying to just make the Coke Series. He's trying to come in with a statement. He's trying to impress all those team owners right now who are keeping up with this series, keeping up with the names as they see the final finishing results and thinking, who is this Joey Brown guy that keeps winning all of these races? That is somebody that I may want on my team in the Coke Series in 2023. So Jonathan Delaney into the wall, and somehow 3 wide off at turn 2 works out, James. I don't know how they didn't pile it up down the backstretch.
Especially when you consider that that is the most narrow portion of the racetrack here at Dover. Coming off the exit of turn 2, this place just funnels. And somehow they bounced off the wall there and halfway down the backstretch, and we didn't end up with a yellow flag of some form, which I would argue is a minor miracle in and of itself.
I just don't. I'm not sure if Jonathan Delaney knew they were 3 wide or he was overreacting to Cody Bias on the top side. So again, this is right in front of Ray Alfala, who's on fresh tires. Watch the 12 car is going to come into your screen, and see right there on the bottom. Oh, he overshoots the corner, gets into Bias and Hurst. So that's the first incident, and then comes back down. Derek Justice is just riding along on the bottom side. Really nowhere for him to go, nothing he could do. And Delaney runs into Justice and then gives a little more damage to Bias and Taylor Hurst. So tough break there. Again, Jonathan Delaney already 1 lap down, so he's pretty much out of this thing. But that may hurt Derek Justice, as he's got a little bit of damage on his machine.
Almost wonder if he didn't even realize that Ray Alfala was underneath him on turn 1 entry. I noticed that as well out of the replay as we go on board with Jonathan Delaney, currently scored in the 32nd position and about 0.7 of a second behind the next car in line for position, which would be Blade Witt, but well off the pace compared to the Joey Browns and the Colin Keisters and company, and just trying to survive and get out of here and head to Darlington next week. Although Darlington offers a lot of the same kinds of challenges that you have here at Dover. They are similar in more ways than you would think. So it's not like you're going to be able to rest easy in 7 days' time.
Well, and it's tough to gauge how to approach Darlington, because last year, James, from the drop of the green flag, it was a fuel mileage race. So you had kind of a differing approach between whether you wanted to try to 2-stop the race or you wanted to 3-stop the race. So you kind of had to commit to one strategy at the beginning. Now that it's 120 laps, definitely not going to be the same case. So these drivers have a little more time to prepare and just try to find raw, pure race speed than what we had, last year, where it was kind of you had to pick your own path, right? Those books, you kind of choose your ending. You kind of had to pick. Do you want to 2-stop it or 3-stop it from the very beginning?
Strategy ever so important in this series is you get a good look at the 2 race leaders who have just jumped away, and for both of these drivers who can just about start thinking in terms of Coke Series action in 2023, they have done the vast majority of the legwork better than just about everybody else in this series. As you get another look at Joey Brown's setup there in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen, the Houston, Texas native, who happy he's repping Victory One and not wearing a certain baseball jersey this evening. I would consider that a step up, but he's done a really nice job for Victory One. And like you said, this is the kind of run that can impress team owners and can ultimately get you more money racing in the Coke Series. I think of Isaac Gann a few years ago, who impressed a certain Parker Kligerman that you may or may not know very well, and Parker was inclined to sign him for Kligerman Sport that season based off of the back of his performance specifically in the Contender Series. So it really does make a difference. Even if you are in a pretty good spot to make the Coke Series, there's still more to play for if you're at the very top end of the food chain as well.
Well, particularly for these rookies, and we know that Joey Brown, he's not a rookie to the Coke Series, but to this format, since we introduced having teams come in, he's a rookie to at least a lot of these team owners, and they may not know exactly who he is, but now they're going to go side by side into turn 3. Joey Brown down to the bottom finally was able to get down beneath Colin Keister, but Keister, a nice solid job of defensive driving right there, goes up to the second lane and makes that work. But exactly, Joey Brown doing a great job here, and it's tough as a rookie in the series, James. When you talk to people who go through that experience for the first time, how difficult it is to impress these team owners, because they're looking at all these former Coke drivers to get, and they just don't know a lot of these names. But coming down here, doing your job, winning every single week, if you're a team owner, you're going to look at Joey Brown more than you're looking at just about anybody, especially brand new, who's coming up through the series and going to be in Coke in 2023.
And you consider, given the break that Joey Brown has had, he hasn't run in the Coke Series since 2014, as there was some contact there with Taylor Hurst and lap traffic. But it's been 9 years, and you could almost, in that sense, treat Joey Brown like a new racer. And if you're a team owner, the question that you can be asking yourself is, okay, well, maybe we could go with the established experience of a driver who has run in the Coke Series in recent series, or is there more upside and more potential from someone who might be coming through Contender and might not have the experience but performed really well in this series? It's a heavy debate that will shape a lot of free agency when we get to that point in January, and a question that a lot of power players in the series are going to ask when they try and form their lineups for 2023. As you look at Jordi Lopez Jr. for Altus Esports, they have brought the thunder this year. We talked a lot over the course of the Contender Series broadcast last year and the qualifying series this year as Taylor Hurst gets shoved way up the track by Malik Ray. But we talked a lot about how Altus really struggled to perform in Contender last year after being so good in the 2021 qualifying series. This year, you look at the drivers that they've got competing. Lopez is the flag bearer for the moment, 4th in standings coming into tonight. But Tucker Minters had a lot of speed. Seth DeMerchant is still in the mix. Michael Cozy Jr. is still in there with a realistic shot. This is a much improved performance for Altus Esports compared to a season ago.
Well, and that's something I talked with Seth DeMerchant about, who's been with them since the beginning. And you're exactly right. How they have performed so well in the trucks, and when they get down to the qualifying series, and when they finally get to this Contender Series, when they work on the Xfinity car, they just haven't had the same success, and it's nice to see that that's finally turning around for them. They have a lot of drivers in this series. That helps a lot too, but you mentioned they have 4 or 5 drivers who are really in the thick of things and have a true chance at making that top 20. So they've done a steady job over this offseason, or at least the Contender offseason, if you want to call it, of improving their speed and learning a little bit more about these Xfinity cars.
Experience paying dividends. It worked for Donovan Strauss last year. He was miserable in this series in 2020 and came back and made it right to the Coke Series off the back of his 2021 Contender Series campaign, and we'll see whether or not it's a similar story for Jordi Lopez and company at Altus Esports, as we are now approaching 5 laps to go, and Colin Keister has stretched it out over the last few laps over Joey Brown. That gap is now up to 0.7 of a second, and it is climbing, and Colin Keister not terribly far away from getting a victory on home turf and getting his first victory of the Contender Series campaign for 2022.
And again, all that stands between him and a victory would be a potential yellow flag as he started to pull away a little bit these last few laps from Joey Brown. And James, this has been as clean of a series as I think I've ever seen on iRacing. We've had one caution for cause all season. That's it. We had Brendan Kohler who spun out at Homestead late in the race, and that's it. That's the only caution we've had all series. I mean, that's an amazing statement that these drivers, we've seen a lot of potential incidents tonight, but they've been able to figure it out and keep things clean and try to make this this series decided on merit and speed alone.
A lot of talk of caution there, Blake. I hope you haven't jinxed us. We'll see. Although there are certainly some drivers who very much would love to see the commentator's curse in play. The problem for them is that this field is mostly spread out at the front, and even amongst your top contenders, it's a solid 4 seconds from Joey Brown in second to Tucker Minter in third, and there's only the lap machine of Kevin King ahead of Colin Keister, so not much for him to get in trouble with in the last lap and a half.
And how about, I know we're going to have Colin Keister take the white flag here, but how about Malik Ray? Incredible run there in fourth. He always seems to have an up and down contender series, and this is one of those shining moments where he proves that he can still do this at a high level.
When he applies himself or finds himself in positions where he needs to push, Malik seems to always find it within him to make it back. As Colin Keister now has half a lap to go, makes his way underneath the bridge in turn 3, back to the front straightaway in turn 4, and Colin Keister will pick up his first victory of the 2022 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series and his second victory in this series in as many seasons. The winner tonight at the virtual Dover Motor Speedway.
Well, this is more what we saw last year out of Colin Keister when he went and won the championship in this series, and it's good to see him kind of get back to form. I mean, it was 2 years ago in this series. He had about the worst luck that you could imagine, so it's nice to see him turning around. Started on pole tonight and ended up getting it done when it mattered, and looks like Colin Keister, with 2 races left, is putting together himself a campaign worthy of another spot in the Coke Series next year.
Just saw Malik Ray offer his congratulations to Colin Keister. As you get a look at tonight's winning moment, Colin Keister burning it down on the front stretch here at Dover Motor Speedway, celebrating victory, and I believe he'll be off to victory lane that you saw there underneath the shadow of Miles the Monster in just a few moments. Here's your full field rundown after tonight's 5th round of 7 of the 2022 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from the virtual Dover Motor Speedway. Colin Keister paces the field for Dead Zone Racing from the pole to victory lane. Joey Brown comes home in the second spot after starting outside front row. Tucker Minter from 9th to 3rd. When it all wrapped up, he and Jordy Lopez Jr., your top 2 finishers for Altus Esports. Jordy finishes 4th. Malik Ray, with that drive that Blake talked about, comes over the 5th spot. 6th went to Dylan Alt, who carried the flag for Elliott Sadler Esports this evening. Vicente Salas, the highest finishing driver for Williams Esports, in 7th. Daniel Buttafuoco, top man for North Force Racing this evening, in 8th. And then Brandon McKissick and Casey Tucker putting together the best drives in the Legacy Esports stable. They finished 9th and 10th.
That is amazing. The Buttafuoco finished 8th after getting that damage on lap 1. Nice job for him. Alan Bowes finishes up in 12th. Derek Justice got a little bit of damage, but he held on for a 12th place finish. 13th was Colin Bowden. That'll be a good plus for him as he was just around the cut line. Daniel Falkingham will make up some on the cut line as well in 14th. Briar LaPrade, great run in 15th. Caden Honeycutt fell back to 16th after suffering some damage. White Tinsley in 17th. Michael Cozy Jr., I mean, he might be right on the cut line after this race with an 18th place finish. Parker White and Tyler Gary, 2 more NFR cars, round out your top 20.
21st this evening for Legacy Esports was Christopher Pfeffer. James Wenzel for Altus Esports was 22nd. Blaze Crawford, racing for Elliott Sadler Esports, finished in the 23rd position, and 24th went to Legacy's Boyd Hogan. Cody Bias, another Dead Zone driver, finished in the 25th position. 26th belongs to Timmy Holmes for Victory 1, teammate to Joey Brown. Ray Alfala in 27th. The first car 1 lap down. Blade Witt finished in the 28th position. 29th and 30th this evening were Taylor Hurst and Christopher Hill.
Again, Delaney was involved in those incidents. He's in 31st. Daniel Smallwood finished in 32nd. Kevin King, a good run that unfortunately was put back because of a speeding penalty on pit road. Not going to help the cause tonight in 33rd. Derek Bordeaux, 34th. Ryan Doucette, 35th. Brian Mercurio, Brendan Kohler, Andrew Navarro, and Seth the Merchant rounds out your field. Tough luck for a lot of those guys.
I would jump in here and love to talk a little bit more, but Blake, we're going to give it right back to you, and you will have the opportunity to chat with tonight's race winner for the second season in a row, victorious in the Contender Series for Dead Zone Racing. It is Colin Keister with Blake McCandless.
Colin, congratulations on a well-deserved victory tonight, and at least some of the unofficial numbers that I'm looking at, it looks like that you may be well on your way and might even be locked in here in the last two races. So you're obviously sitting down here. It's not where you want to be, but it looks like things are trending up for you. You'll be in the Coke Series next year. How does it feel to kind of get back to business as normal, I guess, for you?
It feels good. I'm glad to be back, and I'm pretty sure I am locked in and glad to not have to stress out these next two races, and very happy to get a win there tonight. That starting on the pole helped out big time. That clean air was huge.
Oh, I'm sure it was, but as somebody, you're a former winner in the Coke Series. You've been around for a long time. You get bounced back down this year, but what do you think about next year and kind of having this entire season to learn the next-gen car? What does that kind of change your approach, where last year we didn't really know what we were getting into, but now that you have a year under your belt, anything you can take from that and try to make things a little bit better for you here your second season with that next-gen car?
Yeah, I think I just need to prepare more for the races. I have a slight grasp of the car, but I need to put in a little bit more time and practice more, and I think the results will come. I started to run a little better there at the end of the year, and I'm looking forward to next year, and hopefully we can make something happen.
All right, Colin. Well, congratulations on your victory tonight at Dover. Best of luck to you at Darlington next week, as it looks like we're going to catch up here with second place Joey Brown. We've caught up with you in victory lane a couple of times, Joey, but what more did you need running in second tonight to try and chase down Colin Keister?
Man, that second run, we were cutting the center really well. I just think we gave up a little bit of drive off with those adjustments that we did during the pit stops, and that's just where Colin was beating us. I just couldn't get the drive off on him, and he did real good holding on there. I think I got one good shot at it, and I went down on the bottom, just had no grip with like 10 to go, and I just kind of backed off after that. Just kind of content with P2, extend the points leads, and give us a good shot going forward for the championship here.
Any track out of the next two that you really seem to favor? I know Darlington, and then it's Texas Motor Speedway, the last two that we're going to. Any one of those tracks or one in particular that you feel more confident than the other?
Darlington's one of my favorite tracks. I think I had a pretty good win there during the round 2 Road to Pro. I think we'll be really strong there. I think we got a good base going into it. I think in Texas, I used to be good at the old Texas, but the new one I haven't really quite figured out yet. So we'll see going into that. I think we're going to be fast both weeks, but I think Darlington we're going to be really strong here.
Well, you've been fast just about every week, so I have no doubt about that, Joey. Congratulations on second place tonight.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Joey Brown in second. We move forward to Tucker Minter, who brings it home in third tonight. And Tucker, I know that run puts you in a very good position looking at these last 2 weeks. So kind of talk about tonight and what do you think this means for you going forward, and just what little more you have to accomplish to reach your goal of finally being a Coke Series driver.
Yeah, I mean it's been a little bit stressful with the way the Contender Series has gone. We came out of the gate so well with third at Phoenix, and then I got caught up in an incident at Homestead, finished bad. Then I got third at Auto Club, and then got caught up in an incident at Nashville and finished even worse. So it's been really hot or cold, and I've been, I guess, consistent getting third every other week. But it's just, I mean, I'm really pumped to be in a good points position again. Last week I was sitting there kind of not stressed, but I knew I needed to step up to make sure it wasn't going to be stressful for the last 2 weeks, and this definitely helps with that.
It sure does. And I know one thing, Tucker, I saw you at the Coke Series Championship in Charlotte, what's already been several weeks ago. Is there anything about being there in person, being able to see that whole championship event, that as you're coming into this Contender Series, any part of you is thinking that, man, I want to be up there on that stage next year?
Oh yeah, for sure. That was such an awesome event. Everybody at eNASCAR and iRacing did an awesome job putting that on. And walking out of there, it was like, man, I want to be back. And I was like, if I'm gonna be back, I got to be back as a driver. So obviously the Contender Series is the first step. So I left there, and the next day I was just super motivated to test Phoenix, and then I've kind of been able to keep that up throughout the year.
All right, Tucker. Well, we'll let you go. Congratulations on P3 tonight. He has a Gravedigger flag in the background with the Kevin Harvick, James, but he is not digging himself in a hole, at least right now in terms of points. He's in a pretty good spot these last 2 weeks.
I might remind you, it's my job to make the terrible jokes around here as we get set to head to Darlington Raceway. That's our next stop in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series calendar. 6 races, 7 in the 2022 campaign. Our broadcast will start at 9 p.m. Eastern on eNASCAR.com/live, twitch.tv/iRacing, twitch.tv/NASCAR. Plenty of places that you want to come see us as the field thins, the plot thickens, and we get set to put another twist in the tail when we get to South Carolina next week, is the race for the final 20 spots in the 2023 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series begin to take shape. For my colleague in the booth, Blake McCandless, and the team at iRacing, I am James Pike. Thank you so much for watching our coverage of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from the virtual Dover Motor Speedway. Congratulations to Colin Keister, and we will see you in 1 week's time from the Lady in Black, the virtual Darlington Raceway.